their best. It's Thursday here on The Story, and tonight we've got a lot to get to, including rare footage from the KGW vault dating back to the 1960s. You don't want to miss that later on. Plus, Oregon's unique kicker rebate could be headed somewhere other than your bank account next year. That's if one state lawmaker gets his way. But first, let's talk about street takeovers. A state law allows law enforcement to take people's cars away for good. Plus, never-before-seen video from Portland police that helps them catch these illegal drivers. It's our big story tonight.
It sends a very clear message that this type of activity will not be tolerated.
Penalties are getting tougher for people who take part in illegal street racing and takeover events, both in Portland and across the state. Prosecutors are leaning on a state law aimed at cracking down. Senate Bill 615 took effect in 2023. It amends two existing criminal codes, reckless driving and organizing a speed racing event, making them both Class A misdemeanors, the most serious in that category. If convicted, you could face up to 1 year in prison, a more than $6,000 fine, or both. If convicted of the same crime again within 5 years, that bumps the charge up to a Class C felony, which carries a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison, a $125,000 fine, or both. While those penalties may seem tough, it's not enough to stop people. Sergeant Kevin Allen with Portland Police explains why.
Sometimes it is almost seen in the street racing community as just part of the doing business and the cost of doing business. They buy tires to burn out, and they also have money available to get their car out of impound.
So that brings us to another piece of this law, and in our opinion, the most interesting part. It allows law enforcement to seize vehicles involved in street racing through what's called criminal forfeiture, meaning people who participate in street racing or street takeovers can lose their cars and never get them back.
One thing that we have found that many of the street racers really value is their car, and if they lose their car and can't get it back, that's a huge deterrence for them. They put a lot of work into these cars. They put a lot of love and effort and modification to make them work for them to do this activity, and when they lose that can be really hard for them.
So the goal is clear here. Send a strong message to try and prevent these illegal events from happening, seen as they are becoming increasingly bold. Just take it from Ben Ford, who I talked to this time last year after a street takeover near his house in Northeast Portland. He told me trailers carrying the race cars were right by his home.
It was pretty horrifying. The dog actually ended up crying all night. Very, very big engines where you can you can feel it in your chest.
So basically how it works is when we make an arrest and it meets the criteria for street racing activity, reckless driving charges under state law, what we do is we provide them a form that essentially notifies them their car's been towed and the process of criminal forfeiture is beginning.
From there, it's up to the district attorney. This week, we caught up with Multnomah County DA Nathan Vasquez, and here's how he plans to handle these cases.
We're absolutely going to be forfeiting vehicles for people that engage in street racing, and we're going to be holding people accountable. Really, when we're talking about traffic fatalities, it's an area that is a particular concern of me, and I intend to make sure that this community is safe, and if that means stricter punishments for this type of behavior, then absolutely.
All right, now we want to show you some never-before-seen drone video that Portland Police shared exclusively with the Story team today. Take a look. This is from what police are calling a street sliding event that happened last month on January 18th. You can see just how close the cars are sliding, within inches of each other. And that car in the middle, the one they're circling around, that's a security officer's vehicle. And the officer was inside the car at the time. This was in a parking lot off North Columbia Boulevard. Officers used this drone footage to identify the vehicles and arrest two men. They towed their vehicles. Both were charged with unlawful street takeover, and one faces gun charges as well. Now, this was the first time Portland Police used a drone to track down illegal drivers like this.
So that's a really powerful tool, and we want to get that out because we want street racers to know that we have this tool. and we're going to use it because it's really important that we address this activity.
Police say both drivers in that January 18th event in North Portland were given criminal forfeiture notification forms, meaning it may have been the last time they were behind the wheel of those vehicles.
When we've made arrests and given the admonishment form that we have to give them, we could see it in their face. That is something that's going to impact them.
Now, we asked the DA about where those cases stand now.
Our office did issue charges on those cases. We are seeking forfeiture. Right now, of course, we are in a bit of a holding pattern as we are waiting for the defense attorneys to agree to take the cases. So far, they have refused to do that, but that's not going to change our effort. We're going to continue to prosecute them. We're going to continue to move forward and request that they get appointed attorneys so that we can properly prosecute those cases.
Now, how often do these forfeitures actually happen? We're going to show you a pie chart right there. Since the state law went into effect in June 2023 through January 31st of this year, Multnomah County data shows there have been 14 vehicle forfeiture cases. 5 were dismissed due to process issues. 4 are pending forfeiture hearings. 3 were returned to a financial institution, and 2 were seized by law enforcement.
When we're talking about these types of cases and street racing in particular, often the single most important thing to those individuals is that vehicle. And this is a way to provide an immediate consequence, and it is very directly connected to the activity. And also, it is a way to prohibit them from doing it again with that particular vehicle.
And it's not just Portland. As recently as this past weekend, about 300 people took part in a street takeover in Salem. Here's the aftermath. It closed the intersection of Northeast Lancaster Drive and Market Street for hours. Police say people set off fireworks, did burnouts, and it took many officers, including a specialized crowd management team, to eventually clear the scene. We're told people threw water bottles and cans of beer at the Salem police cruisers. 5 people were arrested, all between the ages of 18 and 34, and 1 handgun was seized. Now, I asked the Marion County District Attorney, Paige Clarkson, how she plans to handle these cases. She told me her office had not yet seen the cases from police, and because of that, it's too early for her to comment on potential forfeiture consequences. All right, so what do you think about taking the vehicles from people who are part of street races and takeovers? Is it the right move? Were you surprised at all with that pie chart from Multnomah County that we showed you regarding how many times it's been used in the past year and a half? Email us at thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. All right, let's talk about wildfires now. Last year, it was a historic fire season in Oregon. Nearly 2 million acres of land burned, the most in decades, and it cost about $350 million to fight those fires, the most expensive fire season in state history. It was so expensive that the Oregon Department of Forestry ran out of money, and Governor Tina Kotek had to call a special session in December to approve $218 million to ODF and the state fire marshal's office so they could pay those bills. Experts say fire seasons like last year are likely our new normal, and that means lawmakers need to figure out a better way to pay for them. So they put together a work group last year to try and come up with solutions, and one of them will definitely cause some controversy. Senator Jeff Golden, a Democrat from Ashland, wrote an op-ed in the Oregonian earlier this week proposing using the kicker to pay for wildfire efforts. The kicker is the tax credit Oregonians get whenever the state takes in more than 2% more than economists forecast. They're forecasting a kicker of $1.8 billion for the next one, which you would receive when filing taxes next year. Using the kicker to pay for things the state needs rather than giving it back to taxpayers is an idea that comes up pretty often, but it never goes anywhere. In general, taxpayers like getting that money. But Senator Golden says if you're willing to give it up one time only, he believes the state could invest it and pay for wildfire seasons indefinitely with the returns. He wrote in the Oregonian, quote, "What would you say if you were offered this deal? make a one-time payment on a sliding scale from a few dollars for lowest income taxpayers to six figures for the wealthiest Oregonians. In return, the state will provide high-quality protection from catastrophic wildfires for the rest of your life and likely much longer. If that deal were an offer, would you take it? Senator Golden says that if the state takes that $1.8 billion and gets a 5% return on investment every year, that would generate, he estimates, $90 million a year to help fight fires. But remember, last year's season cost $350 million, so it would not cover everything. But Senator Golden says it would be more than the $87 million they budget for now that they budget for fires. The principal investment, that initial $1.8 billion, would not be used, only the interest gain from investing it. It's one of 6 options he says they'll be bringing to lawmakers soon. But again, it's a tall order. Senator Golden proposed asking for a constitutional amendment stating that the money would only go to wildfires, nothing else. But that would require 2/3 of lawmakers, which would include some Republicans, to vote for it. We'll keep following this and let you know if anything gains momentum this session. Now, I'm sure some of you have thoughts about using the kicker for wildfires. So what do you think about this? Would you take Senator Golden's deal? Let us know. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Also in Salem, Republican lawmakers are following President Trump's lead in trying to ban transgender athletes from participating in women's and girls' sports. Yesterday, Trump signed an executive order, and GOP leaders in Oregon's House and Senate quickly followed suit with their own proposals. Catherine Cook heard from them.
It absolutely is an opportunity for us to protect women in sport.
House Minority Leader Christine Drazen is challenging how transgender athletes can compete in Oregon. On Wednesday, she introduced legislation that would bar biological males from competing against biological females. Oregon allows transgender students to compete in alignment with their gender identity.
This has been a long time coming, to be able to have a conversation about respecting and providing dignity to all people, while also recognizing that women and girls deserve the right to participate in fair and equal competition.
Drazen's efforts mirror a bill State Senator Daniel Bonham just introduced. On Wednesday, Bonham attended President Trump's signing of an executive order prohibiting transgender women and girls from competing in female sports. Regarding his own Senate bill, Bonham said, quote, "This legislation will compel OSAA to reverse its unfair gender identity participation rule and restore competitive fairness in girls' athletics." The Oregon Schools and Activities Association tells KGW, quote, "We will work to review the executive order with our legal counsel and its potential effect on current Oregon non-discrimination law and association policy." Many oppose efforts restricting transgender participation in sports, including Basic Rights Oregon. In a statement, they told KGW, "Transgender people are a very small portion of the population, and targeting transgender girls who want to play sports makes them vulnerable to isolation and bullying."
My hope is that I will not have to worry about racing against a man.
Lily Hammond is a 3-sport athlete and an intern in Drazen's office. She's competed against transgender females in swimming and cross country. Hammond suggests the number of transgender athletes is less significant than the impact some have had during major competitions.
My hope is to not have to see that and not have to see my friends' dreams of becoming state athletes taken away from them because a man feels like they are a woman and wants to take that away from them.
Catherine Cook, KGW News.
Still ahead on the story, a standoff in Old Town. People trapped in their homes for hours while a man with a machete is cornered by police. What those people tell us they went through last night and why that man didn't show up in court today. Plus, your thoughts on Multnomah County handing out tents and tarps to homeless people. That's when the story returns. Yesterday afternoon, Portland police say a man was walking around Old Town swinging a machete. They were called out to an area on Northwest Nato near the Steel Bridge. Police say the man swung the machete at them and then got into an apartment complex courtyard, and it took them about 4 hours for the man to finally surrender to police. Not really a fun evening for the people living in those apartments. One of the buildings was evacuated, and people living in the others were told to stay inside until the man was caught. All right, let's bring in Devin Haskins now. Devin, you've been talking with people living there all day. What'd they tell you?
Yeah, I talked with a couple residents that live there, some coming home from dinner or work or a movie, and seeing the large police presence outside of their apartment complex, trying to figure out what was going on, only to find out that that man that you mentioned had a machete in a courtyard and was surrounded by police in a courtyard of that complex. Talked to a woman who also lived on one of the higher floors, looking down and surprised to see police in her apartment complex with their guns drawn and seeing that man walking around with the machete. Few of the people using the word scary as a way to best describe it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Terrifying. All right, so the man was supposed to appear in court today, but he didn't. Why not?
Yeah, 44-year-old Sony Moan was supposed to appear in court on multiple charges, including unlawful use of a weapon, criminal mischief, and menacing. But when the bailiff called his name, he told the judge that Moan had refused to come up to court after being told that he was supposed to be there at a 2 o'clock hearing. The judge agreed to have him forcefully brought in at his next court appearance, which is now set for tomorrow. Blair?
All right, Devin Haskins, we'll be watching. Thanks so much. And while we're talking about Portland's Old Town neighborhood, one of the things you'll see plenty of there are the tents and tarps being used by homeless people for shelter. Last night's big story was all about Multnomah County's tent and tarp distribution and how it could be putting the city in violation of a lawsuit settlement related to Portlanders with disabilities who sued the city over tents blocking public access on sidewalks. Mediation between the city and plaintiffs' attorneys began today. We were told they didn't make much progress on an agreement, meaning the option of the city having to go back to federal court is still on the table. We'll keep you posted. Now, after our story last night, plenty of you filled our inbox with your thoughts on tents and tarps on Portland streets.
I have to agree with what the one gentleman said. We're trying to bring these folks inside, not leave them outside. And I think we need to head that way. I don't want anybody to die, but I think constantly enabling them to live in tents on our streets is also not the way to go.
Rich wrote into us saying, "We are creating a sidewalk society with Multnomah County handing out tents and tarps instead of opening warming shelters. Walking up the down escalator is a good description of Multnomah County's efforts with our homeless."
No, I don't think there should be tarps and tents handed out because then when they do the clean out and the sweeps, they throw them away, so it's just a waste. I think they just need to make housing for them instead of leaving them on the streets with tents.
And we'll end with this from KC, who sees it from both sides. "I see tents and tarps as a gray area. As long as they don't have shelter, earned or given, then they need to have somewhere to live, even if it's in a tent. I don't agree with handing out tents and tarps. If we don't hand out tents and tarps, then maybe they will learn Portland is getting harder to live on the street. But by the same token, they need some kind of provided shelter if they don't have a place to stay or a tent. So gray." Okay, well, we all need a little break from some of the serious news, so let's talk about the new baby elephant at the Oregon Zoo. And we'll go into the KGW vault for the birth of one of the zoo's most famous elephants from decades past. That's when the story returns. Well, right here is new video from this week of the first elephant calf born at the Oregon Zoo since 2012. After a 20-month pregnancy, Rose 2, the zoo's 30-year-old Asian elephant, gave birth to a healthy baby over the weekend. The new calf weighed in at around 200 pounds, according to zoo staff, and within 15 minutes was standing on its own. Staff are pretty sure it's a girl, but they won't know for sure until its first checkup. Here's curator of elephants for the zoo, Steve Lefebvre, on how long it might be until they find out.
Hopefully soon. So we want to have the calf in hand for an exam before we do that. And we're working with Rose to do that and make sure that she's confident and comfortable with that. Since the calf's very healthy, we don't need to do anything. So we're on Rose time now to get that to happen. On Rose time. Lefebvre says the baby is a quick learner and has great trunk control for such a young age, adding that the little one is keeping mom on her toes. Well, that new addition to the Oregon Zoo reminded us of another eventful elephant birth that took place there over 60 years ago. So we went down to the KGW vault to find some footage. It was 1962 when the Portland Zoological Gardens at the time welcomed Packy the elephant. He was the first elephant born in the Western Hemisphere since the late 1910s. KGW was at the zoo the day Packy was born. For the first few weeks of his life, the 225-pound calf was known as Fuzzy Face until a Portland radio station sponsored a baby naming contest. A teacher from Gresham decided to submit a play on the word pachyderm, the type of mammal an elephant is, and thus Packy had a proper name. When we tracked down that footage from the early 60s, we also stumbled on a KGW special report from a few years later, honoring the station's 10-year anniversary in 1966. And they looked back on big events, including numerous elephant births here in Portland in the early 60s, starting with Packy.
The next story begins back in April of 1962, and it comes from the animal world. One of the visiting elephants up at the Portland Zoo by the name of Belle gave birth to a new calf, the first successful elephant birth in captivity in this country in 43 years. The baby boy was named Packy, and so captured the fancy of the community that $30,000 was raised to purchase mother and son. Well, owner Morgan Berry then decided to donate the father, Tonglaw, and Pet, who was also pregnant. On October 3rd, Rosie, the matriarch of the elephant colony, gave birth to a baby girl, subsequently named Me Too. In September of 1963, 8-year-old Pet gave birth to little Dino, who weighed in at a scant 155 pounds. 8 days later, Tiwa gave birth to a 240-pound daughter, named by the school children of Sapporo, Japan, Hanako, meaning flower child. Well, elephant births became so common that we accepted quite calmly the birth of Rosie's second child in 1965, a dainty daughter since sold to the Brookfield Zoo in Chicago. And in 1966, Pet had another male offspring, presently called for sale by certain members of the staff. The sixth baby elephant born here since 1962. The citizens were heard to wonder if it would ever stop.
Well, those elephant births have really not slowed down much. 29 calves have been born here since Packy in 1962, including the newest addition. The Oregon Zoo has become a leader in understanding the care, enrichment, and captive breeding of Asian elephants. Well, that is the end of our show, folks. Thanks for watching. The good stuff is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. Enjoy your Thursday night. It is almost Friday. I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.